I've had the pleasure of getting to know Philip over the last couple of days, phone calls, meetings, texts, and I can say that we are in for a very inspiring discussion tonight. We're very fortunate to have him here. We welcome him. His work is highly relevant to the Real Matter Workshop and what we are here to discuss. Philip originally hails from Dallas, Texas. He had a successful career in New York City in the sign and billboard industry. He rolled that success forward into entrepreneurship in Detroit and founded Prince Concepts. He is the president and director of Prince Concepts, which is a real estate development and property management company located in Core City, Detroit. To date, Prince Concept has acquired 20 acres of land, renovated 60,000 square feet of formerly blighted industrial property, created 15,000 square feet of public space, and planted over 500 trees. 500 trees. Prince Concepts has won 9 national and international awards for its completed projects. Philip is a developer, but not an investor, and makes a clear distinction between those two things, what it means to have an impact and change a place versus getting in and getting out and making money. And we're going to see that tonight. He's not an architect, not a landscape architect, but clearly understands the palette of buildings and landscape and their impact on our experience. And he seeks to provide the best of these elements to an accessible and real way in his projects. His efforts to develop Detroit's neglected urban fabric are impressive. There's a sensitivity to context and the preservation of a worthy historical building stock that tells the story of people, place, past, present, and future. Most importantly, his work makes an impact somewhere where it's needed and valued. And with that, everyone, let's welcome Philip Kafka.
Thank you. Thank you. Wow. Thank you very much. Thank you. It's great to be here. Excellent to be here, actually. I think it's so interesting to be having this sort of conversation, this sort of discourse in a place where there's profanity scrawled on the stalls in the bathroom. That, to me, no, seriously, that's urbanism. That's where things intersect, where things that you don't expect intersecting, that's what makes things interesting, right? That's the friction that creates energy. That's how the oyster becomes the pearl, is with a little irritation. So for this to be organized in such a thoughtful and interesting way, it's an honor to be here, and it certainly is energizing. I've got a diverse audience in front of me, a great audience that's energetic, as Mr. Neptune said, a great venue, and a great host. So thank you to In Situ Studio, and also to the Raleigh Architecture Company. You all gave me a whirlwind tour of the city today. It's a beautiful place. I've never been to Raleigh before. I'll give you all a little bit of context before I jump into the work. I've never been to Raleigh before. I'm originally from Texas, as was mentioned. Lived in New York for 8 years, where I built and then sold a sign company. And briefly, it's interesting because the way I built the company was the way an architect starts to work, by looking at zoning code. And then I went around the city with a zoning map, and I'd look for buildings that were zoned right for advertising signs. And then I'd call the owner of the building, and I'd lease the wall, and I'd develop a sign location. It was really, I was 23 at the time, it was really the only way a young kid could get into the real estate business. As I saw it, I was making space. That space wasn't used the way the space that I currently make is used, and this is what I eventually wanted to do, but that was one step towards this direction. Another relevant part of my past, which you'll see in this presentation, is that I studied philosophy. I'm not an architect. I did not study architecture. Architecture, unlike many other things, though, is something that we all experience, whether we want to or not. If you don't like music, just take your headphones out. If you don't want to see something, close your eyes, but you can't walk far that way. There's so many things that we can choose to experience or not experience, but our cities are not that way. And so I was always interested in architecture and urbanism especially, and you'll see that manifested in my work. So with that, I'll tell you a bit about what we do and get going. The way this is structured is that, like I was a philosophy student, So you'll see images of a lot of the projects that we've completed, and then I'll mix in bits of philosophy, things that motivate our work, cornerstones. I really believe in working with a point of view. Points of view are oftentimes can be unpopular, but they can also be very popular. So I don't find it to be interesting if you have work without a point of view. So you're going to learn the points of view that have informed our work and the points of view that our work has informed. So we create celebrated restaurants. Here's a couple images of two of our restaurants. We imagine and build award-winning residential projects. Here's apartments and 188 trees planted. This was our first development project called True North, which is 10 residential units. We imagine and build award-winning mixed-use projects. This is the one project that I've done outside of Core City in Detroit. This is in Fort Worth, Texas. We revive and transform previously abandoned buildings. This is a before and after shot of an industrial building that was slated to be demolished, that we've renovated. This is another building of that sort. Another building that we've revived and transformed. I like to call our, I guess adaptive reuse is the technical term for these sorts of projects, but I call them genetic engineering. I don't believe in just polishing what was there before, but rather thinking about what it can be in a new way and really modifying, respecting the DNA, but modifying it to enhance it. We run our own little fun cafe. That's relevant because it's sort of, I've been playing with the idea of how do we take public space, which is a cornerstone of our work, and extend it to the inside, because in Detroit you only get half the year in outdoor public space. We plant copious amounts of trees to create and beautify the public space and to secure an inspired future. I always say, and I really believe, that if you plant a tree, you believe in the future. I always tell people you can judge a developer and you can judge their project based on the ratio of apartments or units or square footage to trees. If they're not planting trees in an interesting ratio, they don't believe in the future. That's a point of view. Obviously, it might rub some people the wrong way, but at least it gets you thinking. This is our office. I call it a laboratory, I call it a studio, and I call it an office. What do I mean by that? In the laboratory section of our office, we seek truth and precision. We're trying to discover true things about the work that we do. If you think about architecture, if you go back to Greece and the golden ratio, there are true things that make a place beautiful or nice. Our laboratory seeks to explore those and express them in our work. The studio is where all of our personal experiences try to manifest themselves. We all have unique backgrounds. We all have unique perspectives and points of view. Hopefully, our work is a vehicle through which we can express those things. That's what happens in the studio. And the office is how we make it profitable. So before I really begin, now that you have an idea of what we do, these are some of our cornerstones. I want you to remember these as I'm speaking. We are developers, not investors. And I'll touch on all these later. Our goal is to create value, not buy it. With work, we communicate belief. Our business is the creation of leasing space. Our work are the projects that manifest such space, and our art is the imperfect and ever-evolving interpretation, digestion, and an expression of our entire lived experience. All of our projects should incorporate all those things. At their best, our projects are beautiful spaces that honestly tell you about the people, time, and place that they were built, cultural timestamps. At their worst, they're just a study for the next project. Success is what I deem to be success, and this was a conversation I had at lunch today, is my ability to understand who I am and express who I am through my work. I don't work as an altruist. I don't work as a community organizer. I don't work as an architect or a landscape architect. I work to figure out who the heck I am, and hopefully along the way, if I'm making good business, that's creating value for a lot of other people. Experience and mistakes have informed our evolution, and here's our work. So as I mentioned, these are some cornerstones. The presentation is going to be littered in a good way with some philosophy. I want to begin with this one, the developer as the preservationist. We see this often happening. You'll go to a place and you'll say, this is beautiful, this is a nice place. And trust me, developers go there and they feel the same way. And suddenly, next thing you know, there's an application in to change the zoning so they can build more scale, so they can build more apartments, more square footage, so that they can change the amazing feeling of what attracted them there in the first place. I believe that my task as a developer is to understand where I'm working, understand what made me want to actually be there in the first place, and then gently help that place express more of it in a modern way, representing myself, the people involved in the project, representing the current moment in time in which the project's being built. I don't want to change a place. I want to preserve it and iterate its modern expression. This is actually, I just added this slide today. This first picture here is something that I took from the plane, okay? It's a shot that I took from the plane flying into Raleigh. And you can see what the habitat of this place looked like, and then you can see where humans intervened. It's blatantly obvious. There was no attempt at preservation of what the habitat was at all. And again, I know it's only a parking lot, fine, we say that all the time. There wasn't an intent to be architecture here. But if you go to the next two slides, these are images. This is actually where I parked my car this morning in Detroit in a parking lot that we developed. 100 trees and 28 parking spaces. And then that's an image, an aerial view of the parking lot just up there where all the green is. And now that looks like what the majority of Detroit looks like. Detroit was a city built for 2.5 million people with only 700,000. Most of the city has been overtaken by landscape. And so as I work there, I feel the majesty of the place. It feels like no other place. You have International Airport 15 minutes from an urban woodland. You have professional sports teams playing games next to abandoned blocks that are just overgrown. And there's something very beautiful about that. Now, do we need to manage it and tame it and work with it? Yes. And that's what our projects always aim to do. Represent the environment that inspired us to want to be there in the first place. So my work in Detroit is a little bit outside of downtown. As I told you, Detroit's a very interesting place. And what you have to realize is I'm here in Raleigh, and I've gone and I've lectured in Dallas, and I've gone to Boston, and I've been in New York. And this philosophy that I work with has emerged specifically from Detroit and the conditions of Detroit. Why and how? Well, Detroit, because it was abandoned, mostly abandoned, had a very low acquisition cost. Detroit was a place where nobody wanted to invest. So I was able to buy property just 2 miles outside of downtown Detroit, core city, that has water lines, power lines, roads, sports teams, international airport, all the infrastructure of a big city. Not to mention, this city has a brand and it has a history. It's a heavyweight champ that's on the bench. I mean, I wanted to get Detroit back to work. It already has all the things that it needs to be a place. Not to mention more landscape and space, which even makes it a better place than most places. And so, like I was saying earlier, there's 2 cities in the world that share the condition that Detroit has, Detroit and Berlin. And what that condition is that it has more infrastructure than population. You oftentimes have cities that have more population than infrastructure. We outgrow what we've built. We don't anticipate growth. Detroit did not anticipate its fall. And so you have a city with space. So everything that I built, we're going to find out, may only be able to work in Detroit. I don't know. It's something that I'm exploring right now, and I tried it in Texas. This is an image of just the neighborhood. When I started working in Core City, sorry, I'm going to go back one slide. Our first project was actually this little dot here called Decoy. It was our first project, which is a little bit off the beaten path, but not totally off the beaten path. It was kind of not quite in the middle of nowhere, but it definitely wasn't in the middle of somewhere. And then after I bought that little building, I realized that I wasn't going to fly. I was living in New York at the time. I wasn't going to fly back and forth to Detroit, for one little building, and that wasn't really the opportunity there. It was the ability to be able to go where there was pure vacancy and to actually make a place and to imagine and use my imagination and use my skills and try to do something interesting and special. And that's what I went to Core City to do. When I arrived in Core City, this is an image of our first project, True North, just a community barbecue that we would have after we built the project. This project landed in an area that had across 25 acres, which is what I own now. Now, this is not a correction, it's just an update. Not 500 plus trees, 618 plus trees now. Thank you. Those 618 trees too, just so you understand programmatically, I put my money where my mouth is, I've only built 30 apartments. So that's the ratio that we're trying to work with here. And again, it isn't altruism. I'm just trying to make the work interesting. I'm just trying to make the work emerge from the landscape, which inspires the work in the first place. Why would I want to be in Detroit if I don't want to build things that feel like what attracted me there? And so this is just an image. There's a garage. So there are 3 operational houses and 1 garage in the area. These are the guys that hang out at the garage. And so that was it. So basically, when I started my work in the neighborhood, which now the scope of the property that I have is 23 acres. I've renovated almost 78,000 square feet of buildings renovated. 118,000 square feet of land have been developed. 53,000 square feet of public space now and 600 plus trees. So when I started working there, it was, I didn't have to deal with a lot of the issues that a lot of developers have to deal with. I wasn't pushing anybody out. All I had to do was knock on 3 doors and say, how you doing? I'm Philip Kafka. I bought some land here. I'm going to be working in this neighborhood. All 3 houses were owned by longtime Detroiters. Detroit is an 80% black city. On 16th Street, we had Miss Woods. 17th Street, we had Lady Worthy. On 18th Street, we had Robert Reese. And I said, you've owned stock in this neighborhood for a long time. I said, I work for you now. Everything that I do is going to increase the value of your stock, which means that I'm your employee. Here's my phone number. If you have a problem with my work, just give me a call. And the best response that I got was from Miss Worthy, and she said, this is Grand River and Warren. This is the best intersection in Detroit. What the hell took you so long? And it was cool, you know, like I have to deal with other issues. The issues that I have to deal with as a developer is how do I attract people to a place where they said that they were told for decades, don't go. That's a fun challenge to solve. A lot more fun than dealing with issues of, I don't really even like the word gentrification. I think it's tossed around too recklessly. It exists, of course, but it's not, there's specific instances of it that we should point out. But I didn't have to deal with a lot of the issues of, I could be a developer as a preservationist, and I had a lot of latitude within that preservation, whereas if I go to a place that already has value, I have to respect everyone and everything that's there. And it isn't just 3 people that I have to understand what it is what matters to them. It's a lot. Oh, thank you. Thank you. We haven't even seen the action yet. This is like, we're on historic photos right now. I'm going to get you some good action. You're going to be excited. Is the DJ back there? Yeah, can I get that track to play, please? Yeah, no, I'm just kidding. Anyway, no, it doesn't really have that much energy. It's still, I guess, an academic conversation, unfortunately. I'll try to merge like some of that with what I do. Let's see. So this is a historic image of exactly where I'm working in Detroit. This is a historic image of Core City. So let's see if I can do this. So you're going to see I developed a park that exists where these 2 firehouses were. My office is in this building here. The laboratory studio picture is upstairs here. The building, we developed this lot. We're doing a park here. That parking lot that I talked about is right here. And this comes back up. I'll reference all of it, but I just want you guys to have points of reference as I go. Here's a map of the area. So it shows how all of our work is contiguous in one area. So one project feeds the next. Again, this is a very unique opportunity for a developer because I don't necessarily have to make the greatest return on one project. I can do things that feed the value holistically of the neighborhood at large. So I can invest in public parks in the way no other developer can because I have land to build apartments next to those parks. I have a building that I can turn into a restaurant next to those parks. So I will say, people find my work interesting. And I find it interesting. I do, and that's why I keep going. As soon as I get bored, I will stop. But I'm lucky because Detroit really gives me that opportunity because of its unique conditions. And so now I'm going to go through some of the work. So before I show you the first project, I always like to tell our office that rules set us free. I like to respect rules. Restrictions begin to create a project. They are boundaries in which we can start to play. If we don't have any restrictions or any rules, which is what most people think Detroit is, they see this vacant place. It's not vacant. It has history. It has people. It has culture. It has an existing habitat. It has a zoning code. It isn't just some wild place where you can do whatever you'd like. Another limitation is socioeconomic status, and that begins to dictate scale. Whereas most people want to scale things and do them big, I like the opportunity to do things small. So our first project was this building. It was a little 1,800 square foot garage. This was the condition of it when I purchased it. I bought it on Facebook. Somebody was having a fire sale. So Facebook isn't even relevant anymore, is it? Maybe you can buy a building on Talk. Is that right? To the students? Twitter? No. Yeah. So we took this building and we very deftly and gently turned it into this awesome Thai restaurant. So this is what it looked like. Looks, kind of. I'll tell you in a second. The restaurant was open for 11 months and had a 2-hour wait every night. I had a chef partner, he had a food truck, and I put him into business. I had a concept for the building. I worked with an architect named Ishtiaq Rafudin. His office is called Undecorated. He's moved from New York to Detroit. He was a friend, and we've done a lot of work together. We designed a badass restaurant. Our limitations of budget, we couldn't put windows in, but we had to replace the roof, so we put skylights in instead. But now you have this amazing character of a brick building that's old and great. Our limitations really started to dictate the project. So we were open for 11 months. The place had a ton of energy, maybe too much energy for Detroit. 2-hour wait every night, amazing food. And somebody broke in, stealing alcohol, and burned the place down. So everybody grimaces when they hear that. But you have to understand, there are points in the hero. Not that I'm a hero. This is a theme and a myth that we all live by, the hero's journey. Joseph Campbell wrote about it, if anybody wants to read it. It's a great reference. And it really inspires a lot of my work. This is a test of conviction. I had no family in Detroit. I had no connection to Detroit. I chose to go to Detroit specifically for the work. And I always say you have to know the sport that you're playing. I mean, if you think you're going to be golfing, but you're actually entering a boxing ring, you better be ready to get punched. And when you do get punched, if you think you're golfing, you're not going to be happy. What I understood when I went to Detroit was this is a place where a young guy, I was 28 at the time, could buy an entire neighborhood and develop it with relatively not that much capital. I hadn't sold my business yet in New York when I started to buy property there. There has to be something on the flip side of that. There's a reason why that opportunity exists. And this is an example of that. So you have to realize that every single setback is an opportunity, and you can choose to look at it however you'd like. But I understood that. I started rebuilding the restaurant the next day, and we used architecture as a solution for how we dealt with this problem. So here's another image of it. So to get insurance, I wanted to rebuild the restaurant the next day. It's just like boxing. You don't get punched the first time and say, okay, I'm done. I knew the sport that I was playing, and I said, okay, let's build the restaurant back. And Ish and I, the architect, sat down, and we knew we needed to put a fence up. We weren't going to get insurance on the building after this happened if we didn't put a fence up. Zoning code, even though I said rules set you free, there's times when you intelligently have to push them, stretch them, said that we could only have a 6-foot tall fence. There was no way that I was going to take this badass restaurant and put a 6-foot tall chain link fence in front of it, which is what the city told me I could do. So Ish and I sat down and we brainstormed, and Ish had the idea to basically extend the height of the building with a chainmail fence. We used really small chain link, basic chain link, anybody could make it, and we built the fence at 14 feet. My contribution was that I said, okay, for every foot of fence that we build, we're going to plant a tree. So we have 14 trees in this 14-foot fence, and it's a very interesting habitat. You'll see some pictures in a second. I'm going to go to the pictures, actually, and I'll come back to that. So this is an image of the restaurant as it is now. It's reopened in 2017. It's been very successful, and it's a great place. People love it. So I want to go back to this bit of philosophy. Great work that serves as a cultural timestamp. Like, I always believe in working with existing conditions. I think existing conditions connect us to a past. Existing conditions will connect the future to a past. Existing conditions aren't only a building that exists. They're also your skills or your lack of skills, your experience or your lack of experience, the trade you have on hand. I'm not insistent on using certain materials. If I have a great welder, I'm going to use steel. If I have a great mason, I'm going to use block. I think that our obsession is with the quality of space that we make and then the accessibility of such space. I understand that our work is that. So sometimes work doesn't have a consistent attitude other than its obsession with space, and the work will tell you about what our shortcomings or what our skills were at the time that we built it. So I'm just going to zoom through some more pictures of Decoy. I was just talking about this. So we make space. A lot of developers are in the business of making units, of making square footage, of creating buildings that have program, co-working, 200 apartments, amenities. No, we make space. It's all we do. Indoor and outdoor, public and private, we make space. That's my obsession. That is what I think about all the time in terms of work. And space, the reason I came up with this idea and I realized this was, if you look at neighborhoods that had changed over time, you think about artists, you think about people who are creative, what inspired them to be in a neighborhood that had gone through tougher times or had been vacated because industry left? The consistent idea across the board was that quality of space attracted people to places where they otherwise were told they shouldn't be. If you look at industrial neighborhoods that had been vacated and then refilled, it's the quality of the space that made people say, you know what, I don't care if somebody says it's dangerous. I can't paint that painting anywhere else in this city. I can't be inspired by where I wake up for this price anywhere else in the city. So I started to realize if I want to change this neighborhood, I have to figure out how to make space that inspires people to be somewhere that society and dogma and generations of it has told them they should not be and don't want to be. And so that's where I started working. That was a limitation, by the way. A limitation was that people didn't want to be where I was building. So that inspired my work and made me say, I better damn well make stuff that that will inspire them to be there. So I had the idea that I wanted to use the Quonset hut. I saw this picture. This is a picture of an American Army base outside of Berlin after World War II. And I was very intrigued when I saw the picture. These were obviously built quickly. They were built by people that didn't have construction experience. You have spaces in between them, so you start to see like gardens and things happening. And even though it's a bit drab and dreary after World War II in Berlin, there's something interesting happening here. So I had the idea, I want to investigate the Quonset hut. And the same way architects make models in their office, I made a life-size mock-up. These were 2 pieces of property that I owned in the neighborhood of Core City, and I built 2 mock-ups without an architect, really, and basically just said, how do I work with the Quonset hut? These were built looking at YouTube videos. Again, back to an original point. I worked within the limitations that I had as a developer. I had to use something that I had to research how to build on YouTube, or else I was going to get totally taken advantage of by a contractor. And so I had to build something in a way that my workers were going to know how to build. And this was a crew, I speak Spanish fluently, this was a crew that I assembled on my own, and basically it was me translating a YouTube video and us figuring out how to put together a Quonset hut. And we put together 2 studies, and everybody loved them, and it made space, and people were so excited, and this was in the middle of nowhere, Detroit, and it's inspired the next project, which you're going to see. Another great inspiration is I happen to live I'm very lucky to live, Mies van der Rohe designed a project in Detroit in the 1950s called Lafayette Park. Finished in 1957, it's townhouses, and landscape is the idea. It's these beautiful little glass boxes that exist within a landscape. So these are some images of the landscape that I wake up to every day. Dollar for dollar, I do believe, I would put my money on this, it's the best place to live in the country. It's an amazing, majestic place. It's the highest quality of architecture for an extremely accessible and affordable price. It's my ultimate inspiration. These are some images of the units there. You know, all glass walls, 2 stories, super simple, well proportioned. I don't want to get too into the specifics of architecture because that's not my expertise and it's not what you want to hear me talk about. And then, you know, people get together, and this is a fun picture. This is Edwin Chan, an architect that I work with a lot, and Julie Bargman, our landscape architect, and some landscape architects from Columbia who we're working on a project with right now. So this is an idea that everybody who hears me speak or has heard me say this always asks me about. What exactly do you mean, be a developer and not investor? Well, it's very clear in my mind, and I want to make it very clear for you. An investor cares about what's happening around their projects. Their project depends on what's happening around it. And you hear people in real estate justify their work by telling you what's happening. Oh, a block away they're doing this. They're building a hotel there. There's going to be this there. There's going to be that there. That's an investor. Even if you build a building, what you're doing is you're not obsessed with the quality of your product. You're obsessed with the quality of your location. And you're not actually bringing people to a place they otherwise wouldn't go. You're not developing something. You're not developing an appetite. You're servicing a need, and you're going to make a return on servicing that need. To be a developer is to go somewhere. Somewhere can also be an idea. It doesn't have to be just a place. And bring people to a place, a mental place or a physical place, where they otherwise wouldn't have thought to go. And I am insistent on doing that sort of work in our work. And I want to make projects that make people want to be somewhere, live some way. You'll see the apartments that we build, live in a way that they never could have imagined, that they don't have access to typically, and go to a place and be there, even though people told them they shouldn't. So now we start to get to the real work. This was my first real development project, True North. The program, this is a picture of what the area was like right when I got there. This is a drone shot the day that I got the property. The 2 studies are built here. You see them down there. And this project was about making space and trying to bring people to an area they otherwise wouldn't have gone by making high quality space and being able to offer it to them for an accessible price. Now, in speaking to the architects, it's like everybody thinks my work is about the Quonset huts. I've done 3 projects with Quonset huts now. I don't care about Quonset huts. I think about Quonset huts in the same way that you might think about steel or wood or masonry or concrete. It's a type of structure. That's all it is. Sure, it has formal qualities in the same way that brick has formal qualities or concrete has formal qualities, but you think more about the capabilities of what something allows you to do. In New York, buildings were 25 feet wide because they were made with wood then. They started to get wider when they started to have steel to use. So the Quonset hut, in the same way that steel expanded the width of a building, the Quonset hut allows me to do things and make quality of space for a more accessible price. People often ask me, oh, thanks. Do I sound a little dry? I'll have a sip, why not? You guys need a break? Are you guys having fun? Is this interesting? Okay, all right. Thank you. I can't tell sometimes. You know, you think about your work, you do your work intuitively. You do your work intuitively. You just show up and you have ideas and you have a gut instinct and you just start doing things. Hopefully we all do that. We should. You should all follow your gut. It's a unique thing. But it isn't until you have a chance to talk about your work and share your work that you actually understand, you're able to unpack your intuition. You're able to unpack like the reasons why you've thought of the things that you've thought of or explore the ideas that you've had. It's a fun process to be able to share my work, so thanks again for this. So here's just some images of the construction. So back to the Quonset hut. You're going to see a few projects with the Quonset hut. The Quonset hut, it's not cheaper to build in a Quonset hut if you're actually going to turn it into a livable space. But what you do get is you save money on certain, you can then invest in other things. So for the same price that 1,000 square feet might cost you a standard construction, you're going to get 1,000 square feet of Quonset hut too. But you're going to get better quality space within that Quonset hut. So instead of getting a standard apartment with one vista out and one aperture through which light can come in on one facade, you get 2 facades of light, you get length very affordably, you get height very affordably, and you get width very affordably without any columns. So the Quonset hut is something that I didn't care about formally. Like the form is what, oh, he's the Quonset hut guy. Fine, whatever. If they want to call me that, they can. But it's about space, and this was a tool that allowed me to play with space, and I wanted to explore it until it's exhausted. I have not mastered it yet, and it's not exhausted, and even though I'm building a project right now that doesn't use them, I'm still interested in them. So here's just some images of the project. Nice lifestyle there. We have a painter who has a studio there, very talented painter, Mario Moore. So make a place and make it relevant. This is something that I discovered through my work. And I believe that architecture makes a place relevant. There are places just in your gut that you like to be. And today, Matt and Zach took me to one of their projects. And the work that they had there made the place feel relevant to me. Through the thought and the thinking that went into their project, I was able to feel like I was connected to the rest of the world because there's a level of thinking that was relevant to a bigger picture. Architecture in my projects is what makes the place relevant and connects people in Detroit and Core City to the rest of the world, and you can see that through the awards that we win. But it's actually not how you make a place, in my opinion. You make a place by leaving space, by building landscape, by employing that space with trees and beautifying it in that way. A perfect example of this urbanistically is if you go to New York City. This is a great representation of this. Go to Park Avenue, just north of Grand Central Station, and there's the iconic Seagram's building. Mies van der Rohe obviously built the building in the way that he typically built buildings or designed buildings, but he did something very special. He set the building back, and if you look up Park Avenue, no other building set back. He made space. That space gives people the opportunity to be in the majesty of the building. It gives people room to think. I think that our physical world obviously affects our internal world, so I believe in making a place with space and landscape, and I believe in making it relevant with architecture. How does that manifest? This is, when I finished True North, I jumped across the street to this parking lot. This is the day I bought the property. You see the buildings around it. This is a few weeks ago. So we started to excavate this asphalt, scraped it off. We knew that a building was there previously. I showed you the picture. There were 2 firehouses. So we started to scrape the asphalt top off. And this was a directive from our landscape architect, Julie Bargman. A lot of my philosophy has been informed through working with her. We've done like 7 landscape projects together now. And it's a lot of fun, and I've learned a lot from her. We've done 7 projects together without any construction documents. She hand draws things, and then we literally just are on site, planting things, directing, running the machinery. It's great. So we're building a park right now as we speak. So as we started to unearth the earth, set it free from this asphalt, I don't know, underwear that it was wearing, we started to find pieces of the old building in the ground. And we started to take the pieces of the old firehouse that had just been demolished and pushed into the basement, and we started to construct a park out of those pieces. So you can see here, these were pieces of the building that we took out of the ground, and we made these islands with those pieces of the building. There were 2 buildings, and this was an alley in between them. We unearthed the alley, showing the footings of the building around the perimeter. The benches that we used, this building here was originally designed as a bank. These were walls from the bank vault that we cut out and used as benches. So everything that we did on site, every move that we made was informed by what we found on site. That's not typically the way somebody designs. And as Julie says, and this is a huge cornerstone in our work, great work emerges, it never descends. You don't create an idea about a place and then just superimpose it. You actually have to get to know a place physically by looking in the dirt, studying its history, knowing its people, and then knowing your own skills and your own limitations, knowing how much capital you have or you don't have, knowing what the economics of the place is. And then suddenly, through all those limitations and all those points of interest, you begin to develop a project. And I learned that on this project. And again, people look at this, oh, what a regenerative green project. No, I didn't care about that. I wanted to do the most interesting thing I could possibly do. That just so happens to be a green project because it's what's smart. This is a closer up view of the island. You can actually see we found the date plate of the building, 1893 AD. We found those in the ground, and we used it all for islands. And, there's life there. So this space has activated all the spaces around the park. So another cornerstone. Always need to be reminded that we're creating work for people who pay us rent, also for people who don't. Like, public space is a very important part of our work. And we're making indoor and outdoor space, public and private. And I say, and this is what's specifically from Detroit, we want to develop a minimal amount of leasable space to subsidize a maximal amount of public space. Again, it's not altruism. It's just, I think that you can probably count on half of one hand developers that would say that. So I'm unique. Like, it's that simple. Like, just develop a philosophy that no one else, lean into ideas that no one else has, and suddenly you have your own vision. And Detroit has given me that opportunity. This is just another image of that block, and I'm going to go through some of the images of these buildings that we renovated. So there's before and after shots of each property. So this is when I bought them, and this is now. This is an old garage that we turned into a restaurant. A great example of create spaces for people who pay you rent and people who don't. This is a high-end restaurant. It's another restaurant that we built that you'll see pictures of and designed and built. Not everybody in Detroit can eat at this restaurant. I have a hard time even affording to eat at that restaurant on a consistent basis. It's a very high-end restaurant, and it's excellent. It's art. It was a James Beard finalist for Restaurant of the Year in 2022. A great chef from Argentina. It's bringing culture to Detroit. So a lot of people can look through a very specific scope, and they can say, why would you build that in Detroit? Without understanding that it's this restaurant that subsidizes all the public space and the benches there that the people who are waiting for the bus sit on as they wait for the bus. It's the place that allows for that park to exist, which allows a bagel shop to pay a little bit less rent across the way. A bagel shop where you can get a bagel for $1.50. This is all a network of activity. And even though not every project can be for someone, the person who goes to dinner might not sit on the bench in the park ever. You know, it's not that the park is some sort of injustice to them. It's just, I believe that work, like I said, about profanities scrawled in the stalls. Like, it's the intersection of all these different things that makes work interesting. Maybe good, but definitely interesting. Another view before and after. This is a building that we built the second story on. It's now the animation headquarters for Duolingo, a language learning app. So you can see we have offices, great people. So actually create value. This is another thing that the quants at HUD helped me understand and develop. How do you actually create value? You actually create value by either offering a superior product to what already exists, call it a space, call it a type of water, call it whatever you want your product to be. Something superior for a comparable or maybe slightly higher cost because there's something new and something better. Maybe somebody will pay a little bit more for it. Or offer exactly what already exists for a lower cost. There's innovation in either direction. And so I'm always, and the best work will do both. It will innovate in both directions. It's very hard to innovate and be efficient, but if you get really good at your work and you're patient and you take time, you will. So I always want to think about creating value, real value. And it's in one of those two ways, hopefully both. So this was that garage. When I started working on the building, my conviction, again, these restaurants, they're tough. Like that first one burned down, it was like, Philip, do you really want to be here? Like there's a fire, you can go home right now, you know? And I was like, yes, I want to be here. And then on this one, I was like, okay, I finally got a building, it's in decent condition. I put the HVAC equipment on the roof and boom, the whole roof falls in. I'm like, wow, I'm stuck with just 4 walls now. It's like a whole new building to build. And I said, let's do it. You know, I love the idea so much. I always say, like, I don't understand people who would build an idea that doesn't excite them. Work is so tedious and so hard. There's so many cats to herd and so many obstacles to jump that if I'm not excited about the idea, I don't know what the heck is going to motivate me to get to the finish line. And so we had this great concept. Ish, again, from Undecorated, designed this project. I gave a limitation. Rules were very important in this project. I gave the chef the limitation that he wanted gas, he wanted wood, he wanted all sorts of equipment because we were now successful. And I was like, no, you get simpler when you get better. In the same way that Mies wanted to simplify until a building hopefully would disappear. So I said, you can have 2 pieces of equipment and you either have to choose wood or gas. He's like, you're crazy, I can't cook like that. I said, of course you can. And so he said, okay, we're gonna use wood. So we have a wood grill and a wood oven. And then I went to the architect and I said, and you get 2 materials, that's it. And he picked blue tile and he picked walnut. And what we get is a very, very simple, direct, unique space. A space that doesn't have a cadre of all sorts of materials or a vast menu. Everything that you eat is either raw or cooked with direct fire. Everything that you touch is either this blue tile or walnut. It's an honest place and it's special. And I bet you want to eat there. It's sexy too. So then we took the bar. We wanted the bar in the middle of the restaurant, but we didn't want people sitting at one height at the bar and another height at the table, so we sunk the bar, and everybody sits at the same height, and the park's right outside there. You can see a view from the park into the restaurant. Everybody gets a view out to the park. One rule at the restaurants, when I start to design a restaurant with somebody, nobody looks at a wall. That's a rule. Use what you're given. how do we actually create value? How do we innovate and become efficient? I think we have to give majesty to the things that actually are free. I mean, the most amazing things, today was a nice day in Raleigh, and right up the road here, you can go sit underneath a beautiful willow oak tree with a beautiful 80-degree day, and I am in an amazing space that costs today relatively nothing. Time is what was needed to make that tree so large. But there's all the things that make us feel something are already there. Space, light, and landscape. They're already there. And I just want my work to just ever so simply frame the things that we already get inspiration from. And if I'm able to do that, I see this with every product that I do. I get not a lot better, but slightly better each time. I start to see I can give you the experience of feeling a certain way with less, just by understanding what's so special about this specific moment and this specific place. So these are just some more images of these buildings. We have our cafe there, and coffee roaster, bakery, and bagel shop. Our office is there too, another restaurant. Architects love this one. Believe in architecture and landscape architecture. This is another quote from me that I get asked about a lot. Believing in architecture, being a developer that doesn't believe in architecture is like being a priest who doesn't believe in God. It's the system of how we organize space. It's the system of how we think about space and craft space and light. And it just doesn't make sense to me that you would take on the endeavor of trying to build something as large as a building or think about the world that we exist in without believing in the system that organizes the entire thing. So this is the headquarters for Duolingo that we built. We used all the structure on this one-story building. There was an alley in between the two. There was an alley here. They needed another 1,000 square feet. This is 3,000 square feet, 3,000 square feet. They needed a 7,000 square foot office. We closed in the alley here in between the two buildings. We added a second story, and we got 1,500 square feet extra in this alley in between the two buildings. And they moved in, and they loved the office. Here's a shot of the space. Here's their entryway, which was an alley. It's really easy to understand this project, the DNA of it. What's old, what existed was brick, what's new is drywall. It's really simple. So in Detroit, a city that has a lot of buildings that had not been touched for 30, 40 years, there was a lot of decay. And I developed the idea, and I never felt right just aggressively tearing those buildings down. I don't feel right tearing an old tree down. It doesn't make sense to me. I think that we are the ones that are starting with options. We have the intellectual capability to think, why can't we work around certain limitations? And of course, I know that what people say is capital. It's an issue of capital. And so I believe that we have to use what we have and give it dignity again by putting it back to work, as opposed to just making it easy for ourselves and demolishing something and starting from scratch. It requires less thought. So this project is called the 5K project, and it's a perfect example of that. This building was slated to be demolished. The roof was in terrible condition. It was built in 1950. It was originally a grocery store. And I knew I needed to replace the entire roof. The building was built with utility. It wasn't built with architectural pizzazz. And so when you have architecture, you have space and light. This was built, again, for utility. So we wanted to introduce space and light into the building. And because we had to remove the roof anyway, not only just the roof membrane, but also the entire structure, because you'll see the condition of it here, there was an opportunity. And I could pay for 30% less structure and 30% less roof and get actual quality of space within the building by cutting these courtyards out of the building. And not only did we bring the building back to a dignified place, this is the building the day I bought it. This is the building today. The building had a beautiful terrazzo floor, and Julie, the landscape architect, she said, let's cut all the terrazzo, this beautiful floor, instead of just demolishing it where we're going to put the courtyards because we needed drainage. We also needed the cut out floor for plumbing. We had a lot of concrete that we had to take out. Instead of just taking a jackhammer to it and demolishing it, which was quicker and faster, we cut every single piece of concrete terrazzo floor into tiles. We used it for benches, we used it for floor. Here's a beautiful aerial shot of one of our courtyards. And we gave, sure, it may probably cost me a little bit more. It probably took me a little more time. I also probably signed a lease with a company for more than anybody would have expected too. And so, like, I believed in the ideas, and through believing the ideas, I think that there was a return, a payback, intellectually, proud. I show you pictures of this, I'm proud of it. And it's great, and we still have all these tiles left over that we use in our parks, that we used on our other projects. Here's some other images of it. And it's an ad agency now. One of Detroit's most creative ad agencies leases space from us there. Culture versus nature. I believe in honoring and cultivating both. I asked somebody a question earlier today. I get asked this question. I'm going to go here to explain this. This is the Caterpillar project. I love this project. Next Quonset hut project. And so I get asked all the time, is this a green project? You know, people look at the Quonset hut, it looks like new technology. It's not new, it's old. It was World War II technology, prior even. Is this a green project? Well, what exactly do you mean by a green project? Okay, does it mean that it has solar panels? Does it mean that the entire building is shaded so that you don't need to use your air conditioning as much? Does it mean that there was cross ventilation considered? What exactly do you consider a green project? To be honest with you, scientifically, I don't know the answer, but I can tell you for sure which environment I'd rather live in. I'd rather live in a building with 8 apartments surrounded by 188 trees that I can open my doors on a nice day on and enjoy a breeze than live in a building that has to have full sun because it's powering itself through solar panels. And so even though I don't know the answer scientifically right now, I know the answer culturally, emotionally, and this project represents that. And so I don't want our work to totally dominate the natural environment that we want as humans to exist in. Just today, I took a picture. I should have put it in the presentation. One of these oaks, like the biggest oak over here at the park that's just a couple blocks away, had people, you know, playing backgammon underneath it and sitting, just shooting the breeze. There was action there because there was a habitat in which people wanted to exist in. And I think that it's very important for us to not only build buildings, but also really consider the habitat in which the buildings exist. This is just a nice picture, beautiful picture of the project being built. And so on True North, I learned things about the Quonset hut, and I learned that the most expensive part of the project, the greatest advantage of the Quonset hut is the quality of space. But the greatest downside was that the end walls that you put on the end of each hut make each unit more expensive. So the brief that I gave Ish, the architect, Edwin Chan designed the first project, Ish Diak-Refuden designed the second project. The brief that I gave him was, I want to take 8 units and put it inside of 2 end walls. And it's not because I want to save money, it's because I want to take the money that I save on that decision and I want to invest it into the quality of space and the quality of landscape. So what you end up with at this project is, again, 8 apartments with 188 trees, and you end up with, let's see, 23-foot ceilings, these beautiful apartments with 16 windows that you can pay between $1,000 and $2,000 a month to live in, and you're in museum quality space. And so it isn't that I made the decision through my mistakes in True North to figure out how do I, hoard more capital through this project, but rather how do I use this tool that I'm starting to understand and make a better quality product for the resident. Intuition over technology. So I think about this all the time. It's like, if we just think about east and west, north and south, like a lot of our problems are solved, about where you put glazing, of how you site something, how you situate something. Again, when you're obsessed with scale and density, you can't take these things into consideration. You can't think about two facades that have windows because you want a double-loaded corridor with apartments on either side of it. You can't think about all these things that your intuition tells you this is how a place should be built. And so I always try to build projects following my intuition over trying to solve problems with over-engineering HVAC, UV blinded glass. I don't want to rely on technology to solve the problems that my construction might cause. I want to try to coexist with the habitat. We talked about this. Great work emerges, it doesn't descend. Enough said. So this is this parking lot that I talked about originally. This was the site when we started, and then this is the site last summer. So it's much greener now even. Again, like I famously said in a Board of Zoning Appeals meeting, like one rule that I never listen to are parking restrictions. And like I go in, I always ask for a variance on parking. And they're like, you have a parking problem with this project. And I was mad, and I said, I don't have a parking problem. People have a walking problem. This is Detroit. There's plenty of space. This is America. There's plenty of space. And I said, if my projects, if my restaurant, if my cafe is not good enough to make somebody, inspire somebody to take an extra 10 steps to get there, I have a bigger problem than a parking problem. It's like people need to feel comfortable just walking across the street. And so I didn't want to build a parking lot that was looking like every other parking lot that we know of, maxing out again what I have, the product that I have. It was about making space. I'm obsessed with making space. So I wanted this parking lot to be a place where the space was beautiful. Give the cars some dignity. There's True North behind it, you can see. I mean, look at that. When there's no cars in the lot, you're in a beautiful habitat. You're a place that you want to be. People will just pull into the space and then spend 30 minutes on a phone call. You know, roll down their windows and just talk. I see it all the time. We bermed it up. We bermed it up because of a restriction. The soil was so bad that we really couldn't plant trees in it. There were a lot of demolished buildings again, and we had this experience with the park. So we said, well, we have a great opportunity here. We're not gonna cry about the fact that the soil isn't good for planting trees. We're gonna build berms, and it's gonna give us more privacy. You're not even gonna see the cars. You're gonna lose the cars totally. And so this is, and we actually just seeded it with clover. Clover's a weed. So I'm going to show you some evolution pictures of the neighborhood. This is when I arrived in 2015 and started buying property there. You'll see, so True North exists here. We're working on this building right now. The two studies were here. The park is here. My office is here. That sexy restaurant's there. The building with the courtyards is there. Caterpillar's down here. Now you can see True North and the studies pop up. You can start to see some action. No action yet. This is just when I finished True North. Wasn't even totally done. I want you to take note. This is another project we did that I don't really show pictures of. It's just a house that we renovated. And like this lot, we turned it into a beautiful house and a flower farm and vegetable garden. So take note of that property when we slide through. So now you can start to see, actually, yeah, you can start to see the rows of the farm. You can see the house has been renovated, the studies. The park is coming in now. 5K still hasn't been touched. Now you can see the courtyards. You see a little architecture coming into 5K in the top corner there. You have Caterpillar down here. You really have the farm coming in. And that's today. So, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So I'm going to try to zoom through. I really want to do a Q&A. I think that, do people have questions? Yes? No? Yeah. You know, it's more fun to answer questions, to be honest. I've been talking a lot. I like engagement, but I'll zoom through what I have left. Build what's needed, not more. Again, maximum amount of public space, subsidized by a minimal amount of private space. Why max out density if I don't have to? Again, this is a Detroit opportunity. I'm going to show you some more pictures of before and after. This is the corner. There's where our park is. There's that corner there. You can see now as the park comes in, and now you can see with the parking lot, we're just going to, I always say we're going to just gobble the whole neighborhood up with trees. It's going to look like Raleigh. Like Raleigh is, you drive around topography, you know, the roads go up and down, they whine. It looks like the roads were just cut right into a forest. Yeah. But you can sense it. It was respected, you know? Even better, you know? More history, more myth. Here's a before and after there. Again, we've seen this picture, and there's the park now. This is the neighborhood. This is some of our other work. This is in Texas. This is our project in Texas. I'm going to zoom through it. It's Quonset huts, designed by an architect named Marlon Blackwell. Again, we took it to another level, really thinking about quality of space, indoor and outdoor, public and private. You can see in this picture. These are amazing apartments. Again, focus on mastery, not scale. Like with each project, it isn't that I get better and I want to build more. I actually always want to try to do less. I want to master something, and then I can actually that's actually when you master something and you can perfect something, I think that's actually the path to affordable housing. Like people talk about affordable housing, like build a lot of it, build it quickly, find subsidies. No, just really it might take time. I mean, it's gonna take me, I don't think you can judge work, or you can't judge a worker or work for at least 10 years. It's gotta be an operation for 10 years to be able to say that's good. I think after 10 years of doing this work, I'll have enough information to be able, I've been doing it now for like 7, I'll have enough information to say like, I'm either good or bad at this. And if I'm good at it, I'll be able to make amazing space for even a lesser price. Here's some shots of culture. I'll just zoom, I'll actually keep these up and just go through them, and why don't I start doing Q&A, because it's just some shots of culture and some other images of things we're working on. Should we start that? Is that a good idea? Yeah, do people have questions? Yeah, who wants to start?
You got a question back here?
In the back. Yes. Oh.
Sorry, I have the microphone.
Oh, hey, okay.
You mentioned working with your landscape architect and never having a set of construction documents. How does that actually work? Like, how do you prove that something is ADA? How did the city work with you? What does that process look like?
Yes, it's a good question. I mean, you know, Detroit, maybe what I'm doing isn't necessarily totally kosher, let's say, you know? It probably isn't, you know, but the last thing I wanted to do was to have a big idea for a landscape, to have something that was designed to be generous. Do we have 88 parking spaces in our lots? Yes, we put those in the specifications that we know them to be. We don't, the city might not say they're legal, but we go by all the specifications because we don't use any concrete. We use all gravel, but we use ADA approved gravel. So it's more about, I had momentum and I had the idea to build amazing public spaces. The last thing, my last name's Kafka. I don't know if any of you read Franz Kafka. I don't know if you know what Kafkaesque means. But the last thing I wanted the city to do, I didn't want to spend a year having the city nitpick through this big idea that wasn't even going to make me, it wasn't a business endeavor as it was anyway. And so I just felt that the best way for me to figure out how to be generous with the city of Detroit was just to be generous without anybody giving me permission. And so I started to build 100-tree planted parks and just do it. And we're just still doing it. Yeah.
So the question I have is opportunity zones. Opportunity zones, how much of that President Trump's declared areas of places that need to be redeveloped under being able to have capital gains locked in for 10 years, how much of that were you able to use in some of the projects that you're working on now?
I don't want to be harsh or brash in my answer, and I appreciate the question. 0, because I'm a developer, not an investor. And so it might be smart for me to look for opportunity zones, but I'd rather work in an area that inspires me to want to be there and allows me to do the work that I want to do. My area actually, it was so far off the beaten path in Detroit, so abandoned that it wasn't even carved into an opportunity zone in Detroit. It was carved out of the whole program. Everybody gave me an, oh, woe is me idea to me, and I'm like, it doesn't matter. I'm here to do my work. And if that keeps other investors, all the better. Like, so for me, the opportunity zones, it's what investors look at. Like, that would help me if I ever wanted to exit and sell the property. It would definitely help to be in an opportunity zone. But it doesn't inform the work at all. The work is informed by what inspires me, by what inspires the architects and landscape architects I work with, and the people in the place that are actually there. I don't like to fall into the trap of trying to think about those things and play that game. Some developers are very good at it, and that's their obsession. That's the last thing I want to be obsessed with. I want to be obsessed with space. I want to go sit in that park. I want to understand why it makes me feel the way it makes me feel, and I want to go back to Detroit and freaking do it.
One more question.
Yes.
You seem like you're being moved by something greater than just what we are currently moved by in a capitalistic society, which is money.
Yes.
What is propelling you to respect people and trees and history is something that we don't necessarily see in the average person? What in your background is fueling this passion?
Good question, very good question. And as a student of philosophy, it's interesting to me. I think the answer to that question would be expression of self. I think that work is the vehicle through which we all have the opportunity to not only express, but figure out who the heck we are. And I want to like myself. I want to wake up in the morning and be excited about the things that I'm doing and the things that I'm thinking about, and I want to feel good about me. I mean, again, it's a selfish inspiration. It's me trying to say, who am I and what matters to me, and let me go and figure it out by putting my money where my mouth is and really trying to investigate ideas that make me proud of my work. Trust me, I've made a lot of mistakes in my work. It sounds like I'm really rolling and going great. I've made mistakes that make me feel dumb all the time, that make me feel insensitive sometimes, and I'm always trying to recalibrate those mistakes so that I like myself. And that, I think, is what motivates me. Do I believe in greater things? Do I have faith? Yes, I believe in the work greatly. I believe in the elements of it's simple. I mean, to tell me that it's not a good idea to plant a lot of trees, there's just nobody in the world that's going to get me to believe that. Like, it's just not going to happen. It's a truth, you know? And I think that's what the laboratory in my office is trying to figure out, is like, what are the truths that are non-negotiable that I show up to work and try to, and that nobody can negotiate with, that nobody can take away from me and say, you shouldn't be doing that. And so once I discover those truths, I go as far in those directions as I possibly can. And I think that's what motivates me too. Thanks for the question. Yes.
Okay, so I did this
Somebody's bringing you a mic.
Yeah.
I recently did this Raleigh Planning Academy thing, which was super cool if anybody has a chance to do it. They touched on something, or somebody asked a question that relates to something you brought up, which is like this thing of having less parking on purpose. And it's something that's coming up in Raleigh that people have different opinions about. Like, some people want more and complain about it, and then the city says, well, it's on purpose to encourage, people walking, people finding alternative modes of transportation. But somebody brought up a good question. I hadn't really thought of this, that, because like, well, I'm a walker and I'm young, but like, for people who are trying to age in place and stay in a city, not everybody can walk, or walk a long distance. Or like people with young children, that's not always like an option for everybody. So like, how do you kind of take that into account and make sure that there's still enough for people who really need it, or who can't physically do that?
What you're saying is true, but if we go to other parts of the world, one of the things that I notice the most, it isn't the restaurants, it isn't the nightlife, it isn't the food or the language that really strikes me when I go to foreign countries. It's the cross-section and the intersection of people of all ages. It's elderly people sitting on benches watching children play in a park. It's those people pushing their groceries home. And I think that the more you do, the more you can do. And if we create a society where people don't get accustomed to walking, you're right, they can't walk when they get older. Or we can, again, believe in the future and plant trees. And we can believe in the future, and it's almost like planting a tree. Believing in that lifestyle, believing in that sort of lifestyle it requires faith. Because like you're saying, the immediate answer is that, yes, this is not accessible to everybody. But you're going to change society if you have a little bit of friction, and if somebody has some pushback like you had with this idea, that's when you start to realize your idea might actually materially change something. Now, should we accommodate? Should we think about those considerations? Always, Maybe that's why there's so many benches in European cities, because they know that elderly people are walking around and they need to sit down and take a rest. I don't know. I just threw that out there. But our cities will start to look, however, whatever our values are and whatever our work believes in, over time, they'll start to look a very particular way. And I would much rather a city, we know what cities look like since World War II. We know what cities look like that are built to service the car. Let's try to see what a city looks like if it's built to service the human. And let's consider reality. I drive a car, and again, we have to remember, this is Detroit's specific philosophy. Detroit is built for 2.5 million people with 700,000. There's a lot of space there, space that a lot of other places don't have. So I speak very lightly, I speak gently. I don't want, this idea should not descend upon other places. It has to emerge if it works. And if not, then smack it away and let something else emerge.
The only solution I thought of was like city-funded pet cabs.
Maybe, public transport. You're thinking of public transport. Yeah, public transport is the answer. It is, an answer. It is. Thank you.
Philip, thank you for, having this conversation and doing this work and bringing this about here. I was really compelled by some of those first imageries that you brought up in working in the community, and I am wondering what this conversation with the community is embodying and how people are responding to the work that you're doing in Detroit and what those interactions are like and what kind of maybe joy and revitalization is springing from these moments. And if you could share a little bit about those stories, that would be wonderful.
Sure, thank you. So the name of this year's program is The Closer You Get, is that right? The closer you get to the work, the more you're moved by it. I have critics who are very far from the work, who, yes, again, my situation can superficially carry baggage with it. I'm not from Detroit. I'm a young white guy in a black city. I'm bringing ideas that are new there. Not really, though. Detroit's always been a city that's been about innovation and new ideas. It has a history of that. And so superficially, the further you are from the work, the more baggage it can kind of carry in your mind. Otherwise, the few residents that are there, what I realized is they don't, I said that quote by Miss Wood, they don't see that the neighborhood is in a bad place. It's their home, and they love it. And they don't care if you're there or someone else is there, as long as you love their home as much as they love their home, and they don't feel like you're trying to capitalize on the place that they raise their children. If you love it the way they love you. And like, that's what I've learned. And, you know, it is giving them, you know, I don't necessarily believe in design by committee. I don't necessarily believe in that, but I believe in open source. So I believe in sharing all my plans and sharing all my ideas and talking about things and understanding, again, letting a project emerge from the conditions. The conditions, if I get input from community, it isn't a headache, it's information, you know? And some of that information might be useless, and some of that information might be very valuable. And so, again, I listen to everybody for selfish reasons, because it's information that I can use to make the work better and more interesting. And so the work has been received well in that sense. These are people that now have, you know, people to say good morning to in their neighborhood, that now have streets that had been overgrown for, you know, decades, that now are taken care of. You know, we take care of the whole neighborhood, where trees are being planted, where there's energy, where they can walk and get a cup of coffee. So there's a lot of good that comes from it. So the closer you get, the more you like it, and the further you get, well, you know, I have some critics, but if you haven't been there and you haven't felt the work and you really haven't thought about it, I don't really take the criticism too much to heart. But sometimes I get a little hurt by it. Yes. By the way, sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah,
This is an image of the building, that park. This is a great image of it. Pieces of the building with a wall from the bank vault as a bench. Nice, huh? Okay, sorry.
No, it's all good. I feel like I found my way into architecture through affordable housing and a desire to make spaces that are mentally healthy, physically healthy, accessible to more people. I feel like as I've been in the field, the hurdle that I've sensed is not knowing which developers, which investors can partner with such a purpose. Who do you know in the area? How do you find people who are doing the work you do, where you're at?
I don't know if I have a great team of people who believe in what I do. Thanks for the question. I understand the complication and where you're existing. I haven't ever partnered with any other developers because there's not a shared sensibility. 8 apartments, 188 trees. What are you thinking, kid? You know, like, that's what I get. And I was like, I'm thinking about the future, and not only the future of, you know, in a generous way, but the future of, yes, in 10 years, this will be the most beautiful project in Detroit. It's a selfish motivation. I want to own things that I'm proud of. So I think that the question that I always use to vet people, first of all, I always have meetings first with anybody that I want to work with in my house at Lafayette Park. That, to me, is the pinnacle of what I'm trying to do and what affordable housing should try to do. It is affordable housing, and it is amazing landscape, and if you don't understand the majesty of that place, so I think that, A, meeting people in places that are an inspiration to you and how they respond to it or what they understand about it is important, and B, it's kind of like working with somebody like dating. It's just like, the question that I always ask is like, well, tell me about your project. How many trees are you planting? And if they haven't even thought about it, you know, if the answer is not as many as possible, then you understand what the motivation might be. And this sounds simplistic, but it really means something, you know, because the tree is not something that evidently you can think, it's not immediately giving you value, but it's making a place. And if that's what your intent is when you're making affordable housing, is to make a place as opposed to an asset, I think you'll be thinking about the right things. So have a list of questions or values that you can ask people to kind of secretly expose themselves to you, for better or for worse, you know? Yeah.
All right, we have a question all the way in the back.
Yes.
Good evening. It's another amazing day in paradise.
Hi.
My super shiro name is Mama Kai, and honestly, I don't think I have a question. I just really want to say thank you, because you've come, and over the last few years, I think many of us here in Raleigh have felt very violated by the development that has come here and kind of torn down historic places, and there's just a lot of, there's been a lot of change that has hurt a lot of people in a short amount of time. And we're kind of like bouncing back from that. And so you bring such a fresh perspective of what could possibly be moving forward, and how we can take responsibility and kind of take back power as citizens of what we want to see created moving forward. And so I just want to thank you, because like when you were talking about like how there's so many trees, like I heard somebody commenting and I was like, you didn't see the tree count before. Like it was the bomb, and they've been tearing down they've been tearing down trees left and right, and our poor animals are being homeless, you know, as well as the people. And so just your vision, the Quonset huts. I'm just gonna let you know that I'm gonna become the Quonset hut queen, I believe, here in Raleigh. Just want to throw that out.
That would make us a couple, because I'm the king.
Hey, let's rule, baby. And so, I'm not against partnerships at all, but I just wanted to say thank you for bringing hope, for bringing energy and a sense of power back to the people, because what you did was talked about how you really gave power to the people by partnering with them and honoring them and respecting them. And I just wanted to say thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I really appreciate those words and that sentiment. I want to tell you what motivates it. Like, again, I had no connection to Detroit. So what I realized, I really thought philosophically about, sometimes I just have days when I left New York, my great life in New York, and I'd be in Detroit and I'd be like, why the hell am I here? Like, what am I doing here? And you start to realize, well, what makes this place special? What attracted me here? And so the holy trinity of my work became a respect for the history of the place, which is a history that's very unique, a respect for the space, which is something in an urban condition that never exists, and a respect for the people. If you get rid of if you don't respect the history, you don't respect the space, and you don't respect the people, why the hell are you in Detroit? Like, there's plenty of places to do work that are more fun, and there's plenty of places to do work that, like, maybe have a better return, probably too. So it was trying to make work that existed within those parameters that informs the work. One more thing for you, because it seems like if you do have to go and create pushback, a lot of developers, I might sound critical of developers. I have some friends that are developers, and they come to me and they say, how is it that you don't get bad press? You know, you know, things that you just said get said to me that don't often get said to other developers. And they kind of complain to me about pushback. Well, we're investing, we're doing good work, da, 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 da. And I said, if you're here complaining to me about pushback, then you should not be a developer. I said, ownership of property has been the most contested thing throughout history. Trust me, you should be listening to a group of community members, and you should be thankful that it's just them and not the Roman army that's charging your property, gonna seize it from you, okay? Like if developers can't handle good constructive criticism, good realistic feedback, then just boo them out of the arena. They don't deserve to be there. The way that I developed this philosophy is through listening to feedback. I didn't start with this, you know. It was just I learned it through people like you who expressed the point of view. So thank you for doing that. Yeah.
Hi, sorry,
Yes,
I want
hi.
to stand up, but I feel like my shadow is going to be booming, so I'm just going to stay here. But thank you for everything you said. I have a sociology background, and I'm not an architect, but I just LLC'd my own production company recently, and I'm not actually sure how to think as big as I want to be thinking. So I'm curious how you built your team and learned to trust people that don't do the same work that you do, but let them run their own territory, and if sometimes personalities don't mesh, or you know, you don't want to work with like the biggest and the best, but the upcoming, how did you find your team, and how did you get such a team assembled in 7 short years?
So good question. You know, everybody that works with me, like came to me, you know, found me. I think Leo Tolstoy, the writer, had a manifesto, and one of the things that he said in it was, anything you can do yourself, do yourself. And like that's how I started my work, you know? I was a general contractor on my first project, and I just kind of waited for people to come to me. And in fact, my right-hand man runs our property management. He's right here in the back. He's been a great, hey Randy, wave to everybody. He started as a landscape contractor, okay? He had a landscape contracting company. He loved what we were doing with architecture and landscape, and he came to me. He said, let me work with you, come on. And I said, hell no, I don't know you. And then he came again. I said, no way. And then he's like, I want to work with you. And I said, absolutely, man, you're a great guy. And now we're best buddies. Here he is. And we've done a lot of great work together. But so people care about the work, then they care about the community. Like Randy holds the community together as our property manager. Kelly, who runs like the business side of things as a CFO, she also emailed me and said, I want to work with you. Andrew, who was a young graphic designer, he graduated from CCS like 5 years ago. He's like, I want to come work with you. He just left our office. He's going to study landscape architecture at Harvard. Now he's starting. Through the work, inspired him. Our construction manager, Victor, I have my own construction crew, which is really important. Victor worked with me on my first project, and he was just one of the guys, one of the crew of Hispanic guys that I picked up and you know, spoke Spanish with, and he stayed with me since the beginning. So, like, I think that the answer might just be that people that are almost as passionate about the work as me, or interested in it as me, and feel a sense of pride from it. You know, even if we don't get along in everything, or we get annoyed with each other sometimes, we believe in the big picture, and I think that's what matters. Yeah. So,
Hi.
yes.
I'm Erin. My question is that architecture and
A little closer to the mic, please.
Oh, sorry.
No problem.
So we call things like architecture and quote unquote progress. These things tends to leading people to being displaced from their homes. And these projects that might have the best intentions end up just never reaching the people that they were intended to be serving. So I was wondering what you guys do to prevent things, and like what your response is to that trend.
Well, one of the reasons I was so drawn to Core City was because it was a problem. Like I said in the beginning, the problem that I had to deal with was, how do I attract people to a place where they're told not to go, a place where there's no action, no activity, 3 operational houses, all occupied by the owner of the house. They've owned the house since the 60s. So, like I said, I checked in with everybody, and if everybody that existed there for that amount of time, who had been there through thick and thin, felt comfortable with me and felt comfortable with my work, there wasn't going to be a limitation as long as my work continued to be respectful. Like I always say, if the work only excites the international architecture community but alienates the local community, it's not sensitive enough. But if it only makes the local community feel comfortable but doesn't excite the international architecture community, it's not good enough, it's not interesting enough. And the work has to do both. So if I have a project that starts to go and alienates the local community, I'll pull it back. If I have a project that becomes where its edges get dulled so much because I'm going in that direction that I feel like there's not the expression of a strong idea there, I pull it back up. And I'm always balancing these things. I'm always thinking about these things. And these limitations are what make the work interesting, trying to balance it and trying to be sensitive. That's as much as I can say, because for me, it kind of is hypothetical. There was nobody for me to displace in the neighborhood. You know what I mean? So I haven't had direct experience in my own work of that issue. So it's hard for me to say specifically, but I think that it's hard, you know. It's like I see it all the time. Like a group of kids get together, they want to open an art gallery, so they go and they lease the storefront that's been leased to the laundromat where nieces and nephews work for 20 years, and they put the art gallery in, they get bored with it 6 months later, and it's gone, you know. And now a business that's been there for 20 years isn't working anymore. It's a problem, you know. But things change, and they always will, like nature. Like, we don't complain that the trees grow or lose their leaves. We just understand that that's what happens. And I think we have to accept it in a way, but be sensitive to it.
All right, 2 more questions from
Yes.
workshop participants.
Hello.
Hi.
So, earlier you had talked about how you didn't like the use of the term of gentrification.
Yes.
Can you hear me? So can you talk about a moment where you where you clearly saw that it was thrown or misused, and then can you talk about moments where you saw where it was just clearly portrayed?
Yes.
Thank you.
So the way that I would define gentrification and the way that I think about it, the framework in which I think about it is, there are areas that need development. Frankly, they need it. And there are areas that don't need it but inspire it, okay? They inspire it because there's a community there. They inspire it because there's a cohesive urban fabric. They inspire it because there's old growth trees. But just because a place inspires development doesn't mean it needs it. And if you're an investor and you go to a place that inspires you to develop there and you don't respect what's drawing you there in the first place, gentrification. If you go to a place that actually needs development and needs space filled in, needs space respected, needs trees planted and lots mowed, and some real estate developed to subsidize all that activity, then you're developing, you know? And so that's how I see it. What do you think of that?
So I really appreciate your answer, because when people respect what already exists, there's a certain way that you move about it. There's a certain thing that you consider. You consider the current effects, long-term effects. You just consider the people in the space and how this will affect them for generations to come. You spoke about how the few people who lived in the neighborhood that you started to develop, they were happy that you were there because you respected their space and you respected their opinion, and you are very transparent about what's happening, and you're not trying to like hide and stuff. So I don't know, just listening to you speak tonight and then providing examples and the very like large ideas that have long-term positive effects, just really, I don't know, makes my heart happy. So
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Sure. I'll stay as long as you guys want.
I guess I got the last question. So I was just wondering if you would mind sharing a mistake that you made in your career that caused you to kind of like pivot, if there was one, or something that you learned from, like if there was a turning point from a mistake that you made that was a good experience for you.
Great question. I would say that the biggest one today, there's a lot of little ones that have added up to a cohesive philosophy that will always be changing and evolving as I work. But I would say that wanting to work in Texas, an environment where I was from there, and I did it to work, I did that project. My dad saw that I'd been successful as a developer. He said, I have a piece of land in Fort Worth, Texas. Will you develop it for me, Philip? And I said, okay. And for me to think that all the entire recipe of what I was making in Detroit could just be translated without my own construction crew, without architects that I'd worked with before, that it could just be translated into a language that other people understood was very informative to me. The project turned out beautiful. You guys saw pictures of it. It's a beautiful project. It's fully leased. People are very excited about it. It doesn't fully represent my philosophy of what I'm trying to do because it got away from me because it wasn't in my environment. When a market is so robust like Texas, things get away from you because everybody thinks what you're trying to do is different than what you're actually trying to do. At least what I'm trying to do, at least. And it was a big mistake, you know, and it taught me, like, you know, back to gentrification. It's like, I'm not going to develop real estate in Raleigh. Raleigh's working, you know, like Detroit, you know, needs me, you know, like Fort Worth didn't need me. Like I was using it as a place to try to further my ideas, and it didn't work for me, you know? So that's a mistake that will continue to inform me moving forward. Yeah.
Well, Philip, thank you tremendously for this evening and incredible lecture. Let's give him a round of applause, please.
Thank you.